Maritime Matters is brought to you live by Bahamas Maritime Connection.
What is maritime?
Maritime, simply put, relates to navigation or commerce on the high seas.
Some say money makes the world go round. I say ships move the money that make the world move.
Who navigates those large international ships?
How often are international ships required to be surveyed and inspected?
Maritime also protects our seas and borders by way of our local Bahamas Defense
It
Force.
is very sad to say that out of 1,500 plus ships that are registered under the Bahamian flag, only a very small amount of Bahamians are employed.
Maritime Matters.
And pleasant good evening to you, our valued listening audience, and welcome to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. Tonight, our show will project the ideal Royal Bahamas Defense Force. How do I, that's me, Captain Glenwood Alexander Bain, how do I think the Defense Force, our Defense Force, should look to attain the standing of the best little navy of this region? You see, dear listener, while my views on this has to say I'm biased, I stand at a place where I can reasonably and effectively offer positive criticism to this organization that I and many others have made significant sacrifices and contributions to. For a long time now, this Bahamas Defense Force has relegated to some family islands, referring to us as the defenseless force. Some of us laughed about it, but somehow I never took that view for granted. Unfortunately, according to how one looks at it, that perception can claim a degree of reality. But how can we turn it around, good people? To the extent that the RBDF gains the confidence and trust of the Bahamian public, so much so that consideration of a defenseless force will not even arise. For the next hour and a half, I will endeavor to offer solutions to this vexing ordeal. Unfortunately, I am not able to take calls tonight, so you will be kind of stuck with just listening to my contributions. I am in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea right now on a cruise ship, having a whale of a time, I must add. But, ladies and gentlemen, the show will go on. Follow us as we devise the ideal structure of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Let's glance at the past, delve into the present, and peek into the potential future of this so important organization. Before we go any further, I'd like to give a shout out to my number one fan, Annie Mae up there in Freeport, 90 and going strong, rocking steady. Good night to you, Annie Mae, and thank you for continuing to be my number one fan and always listening to Maritime Matters. Our sponsors for tonight's show are One-on-One Pharmacy and also Island Care Pharmacy for all your medication needs. Check out my good little cousin Shantia McBride and her lovely team at One-on-One Pharmacy in Nassau and, of course, Island Care Pharmacy in Freeport. Fill your prescription at the store or send your refills via the online site, oneononepharmacy.com. That's one-on-one-pharmacy, all one word, lowercase.com. The three locations are East Street South, Charles Sanders Highway, and, of course, Explorers Way in downtown Freeport. We are also sponsored by Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited. At BMC, we provide a full slate of ISPS maritime security services. And the latest entrant to our sponsorship, we are proud to announce the joint sponsorship of the Grand Bahama Island Pilots and the Bimini Pilots. That's GBI Pilots and Bimini Pilots. These are a contingent of independent marine pilots that are making themselves available to provide maritime pilotage to any and all ships outside of New Providence Port area. That means any family island and or private island in the Bahamas. So please, feel free to call on GBI pilots or Bimini pilots for your maritime or marine pilot needs. To the listening audience out there, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the man behind the controls, our wonderful producer. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you tonight the insatiable, the man of the hour, the man with all the power. My friend Lester Cox used to say, drum roll, he is fully able and quite capable. The one and only Mr. Craig Gibson. And I thank Craig again for doing an excellent job, particularly with this remote broadcast that is prepackaged, sent to him, and prepared for you to listen to tonight. Today is Tuesday, the 24th of October, 2023. Again, good peoples, tonight we are addressing the ideal structure of the RBDF. Back in the early 70s, the then Prime Minister, the great Lyndon Oscar Pinling, expressed the vision of introducing a little navy to the Bahamas. Sir Lyndon perceived at the time that we were the best little nation in the region. And by all means, we should have the best little navy in the region. You see, at that particular time in history, the Bahamas had a police marine division that, with the assistance of numerous navigators, primarily from Ragged Island, were doing their damnness to stave off poachers, narcotic smugglers, and illegal migrants from violating the sovereignty of our borders. And so, Commander Swinley was seconded from the Royal Navy to assist in starting up a defense force for the Bahamas, hence the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. So as Swinley came in 1975, the new order to the existing Police Marine Division was being formed. During 1977, Kenneth Turnquist, Peter Drudge, and Donald Weir were the three officer candidates selected and sent off to Dartmouth. That's Britannia Royal Naval College in South England, Devon, where they would be the very first three potential and actual officers for this new regime known as the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. You know, these men were handpicked by a combination of people, including the great Sir Lyndon Oscar Pinling. They were no joke. Well qualified, highly polished coming out of high school. They set the course for Dartmouth trained officers of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. The following year, they were followed by another three highly decorated officers, good men, in the names of Roger Roll, Anthony Allens, and Godfrey Roll. They kept the ship steady while the rest of us would eventually tread those roads to become Dartmouth-trained officers for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. A year following those three, there were another three. And in the midst of those three, the other three, the third group, was a young man, fresh out of high school in Long Island, by the name of Jackson Ritchie. This young man was a trendsetter. And he set the trend during a short 5 years, serving as an officer in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, as the most arrests ever made by an officer of the RBDF. How much arrests did Jackson Ritchie make? You know, Jackson Ritchie was just a young man. He was a boy, basically coming out of school, going off to Dartmouth. When he came back, he was so strategic and he was so focused that he would have made 2 times the amount of arrests. If you add all the rest from all the other officers sailing in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force after it became an established force, moving away from the police marines, Jackson Ritchie would have made twice as much arrests than everybody else put together to date. That's history, people. Those are facts. I'm not guessing. I worked along with him for a while. But before I worked along with him, he made plenty arrests. When I worked with him, we made a lot more arrests. So nobody need to tell me whether I know what I'm saying. I know what I'm talking. Jackson Ritchie has some accolades that he should be achieving. Will he achieve them? I don't know. But I tell you, the young man was a household name. Every time he went to sea, he came back with arrests. Ships, small boats, big boats, you name it. And I gotta say it because nobody else will say it. And following the Jackson Ritchie crew and a couple other crew, there came a young officer that went to Dartmouth. And he wasn't that young. He was much older than most of us that went to Dartmouth because this officer had already completed university. He was a teacher. And he decided he's going to throw his hat in the ring and join the new order of the existing Police Marine Division to become the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. His name, none other than Davy Roll. You see, why Davy Roll, in my opinion, and I guess as far as the records would speak, was so important, not only to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, but to the entire region. Because Davy Roll would have been the very first officer in Dartmouth coming out of this region that would have reached the post of divisional sub-lieutenant. What is a div sub at Dartmouth? He was only in his 3rd term, and they would put him in charge of one of the 5 divisions in the quarters. Now, see, this may not sound like a big deal, but I've been to Dartmouth, and I can tell you, a div sub in Dartmouth is a big deal, especially for an officer that is only doing 3 terms. You see, Dartmouth is designed for full-term Royal Naval officers who do 5 terms. Then you have the short-term officers that do 3 terms. And most divisional sub-lieutenants, first of all, are British. I wouldn't put my head on a chopping block for nothing. But I will go on a limb and say that Davy Roll was perhaps the very first non-British person to attain the posting of divisional sub-lieutenant for a division at Dartmouth in year 3. Because even the British people didn't hardly do it. Most of the people did it in their 4th or 5th year because they were full-term officers and all the rest of that. And I must say that, you know, Davy had the advantage of having completed university and having a degree already, having some age and some experience already. But he did it. That cannot be taken away from nobody. He was, I think, the first international div sub-lieutenant attending Britannia Royal Naval College in the history of the college. And he's something like Sweet Bells Thompson in basketball. He was the first non-American to get the #1 pick coming out of university going into the NBA in the history of the sport. Some things we can't whitewash. Some things we need to talk about. Everybody should know about these things. And a few years later, the Bahamas would have had a second div sub at Dartmouth in his third term. Who was that young man? My good friend. Younger than I am, joined after I did. Well, I couldn't become div sub because, I think that part of the reason is this young officer, just like Davy Roll, was in the smallest division at Dartmouth. And I'm not giving no excuses as to why they were div sub, because they may have been div sub in any division they put them in. I think they were that good. Tony Archer, Anthony Tony Archer, as we know him. He is now a fully cleared pilot in the Freeport Harbor Company system of piloting ships in and out the harbor. He would have been the second Defense Force Dartmouth trained officers to hold that prestigious post of Div Sub-Lieutenant in his senior term at Dartmouth, where he would have been in charge of an entire division. So you see, people, we had some sharp Bahamians attended Dartmouth. And you might ask, okay, so he's a pilot in Freeport. Why not Nassau Harbor? Excuse me. I can tell you why. I'll be happy to tell you why not Nassau Harbor. Because the system in Nassau Harbor didn't give him an opportunity to be a pilot in Nassau Harbor. See, I know Tony Archer. Maybe he and I talk all the time. He made efforts to become a pilot in Nassau Harbor, and he was turned away. So he went to Freeport, and eventually he became a fully cleared, licensed pilot in the Freeport Harbor Company system. And he's not the only one. He's not the only one that was turned away in Nassau Harbor from becoming a Marine pilot. There's the young man who was also a Dartmouth trained officer, who was overall in charge at Freeport Harbor Company, and the only other person in the country that can appoint a pilot other than the Minister of Transport. And he can only appoint pilots that are going to work in Freeport Harbor proper. But Orlando Forbes, currently the port director in Freeport Harbor Company system, is a Dartmouth trained officer that left the Defense Force at an early stage. He put in his 5+ years, and then he decided, look, I did what I had to do. I'm getting out of here because I'm going to pursue a career in piloting. And he did. Went to Freeport, became a pilot, and now he's overall in charge of all the pilots. And he's appointing pilots as he holds that post. And again, the first Bahamian to hold the post of port director at Freeport Harbor. And he's followed very closely by another Dartmouth trained officer. That would be Charles Roll. Again, left the Defense Force shortly after he did his 5 years that was owed to the government for sending him off to Dartmouth. Went to Freeport. And he also became, and still is, an unlimited pilot. And then we have, in addition to Tony Archer, Sean Thurston, another Dartmouth trained officer that is in the Freeport Harbor system as a fully cleared pilot. So we have 4 Dartmouth trained officers and sharp officers. I don't want you to think these guys are no jokes. These are sharp. They did extremely well at Dartmouth, all of them. And they are all now fully cleared pilots in the Freeport Harbor system. So there. Davy Roll, Tony Archer, Div Subs at Dartmouth. And this is how the Defense Force garnish people, send them off, and some of the accomplishments that we made. We started off with Kenter and Quest, Peter Drudge, and Don Bear. They all did well at Dartmouth. Later on, we had Jackson Ritchie, did extremely well in the entire Defense Force. Of course, we had Roger Roll, Anthony Allens, and Godfrey Roll. Again, 3 standout Dartmouth trained officers that shaped and molded the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Jackson Ritchie made more arrests than any other officer in the history of that force. Davy Roll, Tony Archer, sub-lieutenants. And that's basically the highlight of some of the acclamations of persons that were selected. And there are more. There are more. I'm only really touching the standouts as I recall it. And, I was only in the force for so long. There are people who can call more standouts, more accolades, more achievement from not only Dartmouth trained officers, but also ratings in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Then, we had some officers that once they were out of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, they went to run tankers under the Marine Tanker Fleet. Amos Roll would have been the first one. Bert Williams, who's now a surgeon, somewhere in the U.S., I've been in his office, I know him very well. He's a medical doctor, a surgeon. He would have gone and ran ships, tankers at Marine Tanker Service after he was out of the Defense Force. So was James Wallace. He went in the Marine Tanker Service and ran tankers and made a career out of it. But you know what? In all of that, we had not one engineer that left the Defense Force and served on board any Marine Tankers fleet ships. And we must ask ourselves why. Why we had a series of officers going to become captains, but nobody became engineers. And we know the answer, eh? The answer is Defense Force, as it is today and as it was from Jump Street, never focused on making engineering officers, sending people off to become engineers. And this is one of the things we got to do, eh? The Royal Bahamas Defense Force is ripe with potential, ripe with resources. And there's no reason in the world why we can't have a cadre of people leaving that force and signing on to ships outside of the Defense Force as engineering officers, as chief engineers, as second engineers, as oilers, as fitters. Because Defense Force has the ability to make this happen. Just like how we have the ability to make it happen with deck officers. We can make it happen with engineering officers. Deck ratings, we can make it happen with engineering ratings. And we need to look at how we could prepare people in the Defense Force to become certified to do these jobs once they're ready to move on or once they retire. Because there's a big need in this country, and it could only improve the entire country. If you look at a company like what used to be Marine Tanker Services, they're no longer that name, but it's the same kind of company. They got a whole heap of foreigners running those ships as captains, as mates, as chief engineers, as second engineers, as oilers, as wipers. And they operating solely in our country. And you might ask why? Because we do not have available to them the engineers with the certification they need by way of the STCW convention. Because nobody focuses on it. Nobody provides that Bahamians, and Bahamians are some of the smartest people in the world. We all know that. We're some of the smartest people in the world. We're some of the most active people in the world. We got accolades to show it in all different areas. Sports, education, you name it. We ain't short for nothing. So, my dear listeners, we are going to break down the structure of the Defense Force. Well, no, we're not going to break it down. We're going to contribute to what it should be like and some of the things that should be in place so that at the end of the day, an officer coming out of, a student coming out of high school with high grades can be attracted to wanting to join the Defense Force. An officer or seniorate retiring from the Defense Force will be attracted to the outside world to hire. Because some of these people are extremely young. You're talking about 43 years old in some cases. Less than 50 years old in most cases. And if they want to push it because they don't really want to go nowhere, they're 55 now, 60 years old. Some of these people are ready to engage the commercial market. So let's look at the command structure of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Of course, we have the Commander Defense Force. We call it CDF. The one person that commands that force, that person is overall in charge of the entire force. And of course, his rank is a Commodore. At inception, there was Commander William Swinley, who became the first Commodore for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. So he had to rub shoulders with the senior police officers in the Police Marines, because of course, this is the force that we're going to convert into a defense force. We will take some of those police that want to remain, and we will inject some new blood, some fresh, well-trained, DATMA-trained officers, ratings that we're going to train ourselves, and make the defense force from what was the Marine, Police Marine Division to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And so Mr. Swinley was tasked with shaping what this new regime is going to be like. And again, in 1977, we sent off the first three: Turnquest, Drudge, and Ware. So Swinley would have shaped the force for the first couple of years. And most officers, even myself, when I went off to Dartmouth in 1981, Mr. Swinley was still the Commodore. So he took it from the first officers going in 77 straight up to when I went in 1981. Because when I returned in 1982, Mr. Swinley was gone, and he was replaced by the highly polished Commodore Christopher Belton, another officer loaned from the Royal Navy to the Defense Force to keep it going. So, somehow, Commodore Belton's time was cut short because he only spent about 2 years as Commodore, and the helm was passed on to Commodore Leon Smith, the first Bahamian to take the helm of the new regime, Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Of course, Commodore Leon Smith would have been subsequently followed by Davy Roll, who was the next Bahamian Commodore that took the helms of the force. He would have been followed by Clifford Butch Scavella, Commodore Roderick Bowe, Commodore Tellis Bethel would have taken over from Roderick Bowe, and we now have Commodore Raymond King, and most would say Commodore Dr. Raymond King. And he earned to be called Doctor, so he's Dr. Raymond King. They all contributed to the shaping of what exists today. And we are not what the vision of the RBDF by Sir Lyndon Oscar Pinland was set out to be. But wait, can we become the best little navy in the region? I put it to you, dear listener, that we Bahamians possess the potential. It just needs to be shifted and molded, and some new things need to be injected, and some old things need to be cut out. And yes, we can become the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, tag best little navy in the region. So we have the Commodore at the helm. And then we have, of course, according to my recommendations, a Chief Staff Officer working directly under the Commodore at headquarters. And this Chief Staff Officer would be a 4-rank captain, the position just below the Commodore. And then we would have at the base the person who's running the force for the Commodore. And that name always existed, the Captain of Coral Harbor. Because anything outside of a headquarters comes under Coral Harbor Base. So the person in charge of Coral Harbor Base would again be the second 4-rank captain. And there would be no need for another 4-rank captain in this entire force. Eh? We got one 4-rank captain just below the Commodore doing his work at headquarters, and one 4-rank captain running the base at Coral Harbor, including all of the ships, all of the departments. And we're going to break them down in a minute. Now that Chief Staff Officer, that 4-rank captain working at headquarters just below the Commodore, or the Commander Defense Force, which we should only have one Commodore, eh? 2 captains, 1 Commodore. That Chief Staff Officer will have below him 2 commanders, full 3-ring commanders. We ain't doing no more 3.5-ring. No senior commander and commander. No. Cut that foolishness out. Eh? We need a force that ranks are respected for what they are. So we'll have a 3-ring commander being the force liaison officer, and a 3-ring commander being the public liaison officer. So one of those commanders deal directly with the Defense Force on behalf of the Chief Staff Officer, and the other one will deal with anything outside of Defense Force on behalf of the Chief Staff Officer. And those 2 commanders would report to that captain who, of course, will be running the show from the headquarters perspective for the Commodore. We'll break down how they fit into the game in a bit. Because now we got to look at the captain of Coral Harbor. How many commanders would he have working to keep things going and running the entire force outside of headquarters? We're going to give him 4. So we have 2 at headquarters, full 3-ring commanders, and we have 4 at the base. Because, of course, there's more work involved in running the base than it is running headquarters, eh? So the Captain Coral Harbor would have reporting to him a squadron commanding officer. We know what the squadron is. All of the vessels, large craft and small craft. Once it is a vessel that Defense Force is responsible for, because sometimes, we don't always buy them. Sometimes we get captured craft and we convert them to use for Defense Force purposes. And that was going on from time, eh? Because, boy, some of them save us. I can tell you, I used to be in charge of the Monarchy at one point. That was the most running ship in the fleet for years. So, the squadron commanding officer would be overall responsible for all the ships, the running of those ships. Then we're going to have the force engineering officer, who's also going to be a 3-ring commander, side by side, neck and neck with the squadron commanding officer. Because engineering is that important. Engineering, the ship cannot run if the engineering isn't right. So the squadron commander can't do anything if you don't have somebody taking care of the engineering side of those ships that have to go to sea. Eh? So we have the squadron commanding officer and the force engineering officer. And each of them would have a team of lieutenant commanders working below their ram to keep things going. Eh? Yeah, we're going to keep everything in perspective. So the captain of Coral Harbor would be responsible for the squadron commanding officer, the force engineering officer, and of course, a base executive officer. Because we're going to need a senior person, a 3-ring commander, to regulate everything that's going on the base. And that's with the staff that are employed shoreside, and also all civilian staff that are employed to work within the Royal Bahamas. And we have a whole litany of civilian staff, as we will say and see. And the fourth commander, actually he wouldn't be a commander. He will be a lieutenant colonel, because the Defense Force now needs to move away from having military operations, which we used to call MOP, platoon in those days, to an infantry division. And that infantry division will be led by an infantry commanding officer who is going to be a lieutenant colonel, which is equivalent, to a three-ring commander of the Navy. So we'll have, answering to the captain of Coral Harbor, the squadron commanding officer, the force engineering officer, the base executive officer, and the infantry commanding officer. Now, we're going to break those down for you. How are we going to do that? We'll break them down just as they come. So we go down to the headquarters. Let me break it down a bit, because we know what the chief staff officer does. He's basically running things as a foreign captain for the Commodore, and below him would be the force liaison officer. What is the force liaison officer going to be responsible for? He is going to have 5 lieutenant commanders working under his remit, because he's a full three-ring commander. So there's 5 lieutenant commanders, and what would they be running? They would be running, one would be liaising directly with the captain of Coral Harbor with what's going on at the base, because of course the chief staff officer needs to know on a daily basis, step by step, what is going on the base. So he has a lieutenant commander reporting directly to him, who's talking and liaising with the captain of Coral Harbor on an ongoing basis, even after work. And then, of course, he needs a lieutenant commander to be the liaison head of departments, right? He will deal directly with the BEO, that's with the force engineering officer, with the squadron commanding officer, those same 4 commanders that work directly under the captain Coral Harbor. The liaison heads of department would be dealing directly with them, although he's only a lieutenant commander, but he's reporting to the force liaison officer, who, of course, is a full three-ring commander. So, again, the command, being the Commodore, through the captain and the chief staff officer, would be getting direct reports from heads of department. Well, not direct reports, but the force liaison officer getting direct reports by way of his liaison heads of departments for the base. And then he would have a lieutenant commander working under him. And this is, again, the force liaison officer who's reporting to the chief staff. He would have somebody reporting to him as the headquarters staff management. He would be the lieutenant commander in charge of all the staff at headquarters, well, of course, except the ones above him. And then they would have a project and planning manager or officer that, again, would be reporting to the force liaison officer. He's working in headquarters, and they're doing all the projected planning for Defense Force new vessels, for all the vessels that they have, all the bases that they have, and he's going to always be planning and projecting the way forward for the Defense Force, and he's going to be reporting again directly to the Force Liaison Officer, who will in turn be reporting to the Chief Staff Officer who's running things for the Commodore. And then, last but not least, under the Chief Staff Officer and would be the Force Liaison Officer, and his 5th Lieutenant Commander would be a recruitment officer, finding the right people to bring into the force, going out into the schools and letting those sharp young men know, we'll send you away to be an engineer, we'll send you away to be an officer, we'll send you away to be a Green Beret. Somebody has to do that. That, again, would be the recruitment officer. And then we got the public liaison officer. This would be the second liaison officer that reports directly to the chief staff officer. The public liaison officer, he would have working below him, again, 5 lieutenant commanders. And you ask, why so many lieutenant commanders at headquarters? No, 5 and 5, 10. That's only 10. We're going to have like 60 or 70 lieutenant commanders in this force because, again, we got to respect these ranks. So the public liaison officer would have reporting to him the person dealing directly with the Ministry of National Security. The Ministry of National Security and the Office of the Prime Minister. This will be the go-to person at headquarters that is going to be responsible for the public liaison officer for all affiliations going on between the Defense Force and the Ministry of National Security, the Defense Force and the Office of the Prime Minister. So his plate is going to be full, eh? And he will be reporting to the 3-ring commander, the public liaison officer. And again, a second person reporting to the PLO or the public liaison officer would be the liaison with other government organizations. So we're going to have a lieutenant commander now dealing with the Royal Bahamas Police Force, with NEMA when it comes to disaster relief, with the BMA when it comes to things like officers being posted in the London office to assist the BMA with their technical management of ships. The BMA, when we're talking about in Nassau, with the port state inspections. The BMA has 1 or 2 port state inspectors. We're going to put another 10 Defense Force officers in there on a rotational basis. Yeah, 10 at a time. And these could be junior officers. They don't have to be all senior officers. It's a litany of officers. Because all of them really should know what it is to do port state inspection while they in the force, so that when they get back on their ships and they're in charge, they see in ships that they know how to deal with these commercial ships, eh? So then you get the liaison for other government organizations dealing with the police force, NEMA, the BMA, the port department. The port department currently has the person in charge who is a commissioned Defense Force officer on loan. He is seconded to the port department. Plus, there is a grouping at the port department that deals with all ISPS facilities in the Bahamas, all 27 of them, eh? That grouping, again, the liaison, other government organization person at headquarters would be directly responsible and linked with the ongoing of that entity at the port department. And then we have the immigration department whenever you're dealing with stowaways coming in at sea, when we get illegal migrants, the fisheries department when we deal with poachers and that type of thing, NAD when we're dealing with the airport situation, with the flight control and all the rest of it. You know, the Defense Force had to step in once or twice to deal with that type of thing. And then we have the BPL situation where we have unrest with BPL. We need Defense Force persons to be liaising with them at all times. And we need to keep Defense Force personnel in and out of BPL so that, you know, the country don't have to come to a standstill. We could have some level of activities where Defense Force people can assist in times when you have the power company for the country being threatened. So yes, we need that liaison with other government organizations. And then we need the liaison with foreign entities, high commissions, embassies, U.S. Coast Guard, Organization of American States. So we'll have a lieutenant commander to deal with just those. When it comes to training, when it comes to liaison with Coast Guard, with operations and that type of thing, all the embassies that we have to deal with when we're sending people off to these countries from the Defense Force. So we'll have a lieutenant commander at headquarters working directly under the PLO or the public liaison officer to deal with these type matters. You have liaison with NGOs, Red Cross, BASRA, Bahamas National Trust. We'll have a lieutenant commander dealing with just that, eh? And he will be reporting to the public liaison officer, who in turn reports to the chief staff officer. And last but not least, the international trainings, the people going to Dartmouth, people who are going to HMS Sultan, HMS Sanders, Limestone, U.S. Coast Guard, all these people we're sending for training, we need an officer to deal directly with these entities, to keep up with how they're doing, how the training is going, how the institution is being lent over to the Defense Force, and all the rest of that good stuff. So again, we will have 5 lieutenant commanders reporting to the public liaison officer at headquarters in these areas. These are very important areas, and that's basically your setup for your heads at headquarters. You have the chief staff officer, who has below him the force liaison officer and the public liaison officer. Force liaison have 5 lieutenant commanders in those 5 areas, and of course, same thing with the public liaison officer. So we have in our remit 10 lieutenant commanders reporting to 2 liaison officers, both officers reporting to chief staff officer, who in turn runs the headquarters and those various entities for the Commodore. Then we have Coral Harbor Base. And under the Coral Harbor Base, we have the captain of Coral Harbor. This is the head honcho. This is the one person that is basically running the job. Because you see, headquarters is in the job. Headquarters is where the command sits with his team of people that are reaching out to entities outside of the Defense Force. But then the crux of the job is at the base. This is where the work is carried out from. The head honcho would be the captain of Coral Harbor. Of course, he would be the foreign captain. And the captain of Coral Harbor would have working under him 5 3-ring commanders. These are the heavy hitters, eh? These are the heavy hitters. You don't need no more than 5. And the areas they would be in, you would have the squadron. So that'll be the squadron commanding officer. You have engineering. That would be the force engineering officer. He would be a 3-ring commander as well. There's another 3-ring commander. When you look at the administration department, the BXO, he's a 3-ring commander. And then our 4th would be infantry division, right? All of those infantry people and the infantry commanding officer would be again at the rank of equal to commander, which would be lieutenant colonel. So those would be the 4 entities that are reporting on an ongoing basis to who? To the captain of Coral Harbor. And that is my projection of what the ideal Coral Harbor base should be. So let's break them down. Deck department. Before we get into the deck department and the SCO, squadron commander, let's quickly discuss the impact that the police marines had on this new regime that morphed into the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. We had Amos Roll. Amos Roll, well, Leon Smith would have been the top ranking officer moving across the threshold from the Police Marine Division to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And of course, he became the first Commodore. And then you had Amos Roll, who would have been next in rank to Leon Smith. Now, Amos Roll, in my opinion, was the most impacting officer, bar none, that the Defense Force would have had walk through our doors. Why do I say that? I say that because Amos Roll would have been the person that was in command of the HMBS Flamingo when it was bombed. But not only that, I say that because Amos Roll would have been the most supporting officer. And when I say most supporting, I'm speaking about supporting his subordinates, his junior officers and his senior officers that come under him. That you didn't get from a Leon Smith. I recall my personal experience. I was in a situation at sea where we made an arrest, and the persons that we arrested them for airdrop. We boarded their cabin cruiser, and you almost could get high from smelling all the marijuana residue, but they had not 1 ounce of marijuana on board. So we knew that they were in this area called Williams and Billy Islands. We knew they had to put the stuff on one of the keys, eh? So we launched a search. One team went to the Williams Island and the other team went to Billy Island. Of course, I went to Williams Island because I was the most junior man. My boy Tellis Bethel was my XO. I was his Navo, and well, of course, Jackson Ritchie was the captain, eh? So we went to Williams and Billy Island and did that search. And while we were doing the search, of course, the sun came up, and anybody who has any idea about the flats on Williams and Billy Island, when you step into the sea, of course, it's only about knee deep, but by the time your foot keeps sinking in that mud, your whole thigh underwater. That's how deep the sink was. So you had to bail your foot out, and so we all started to get tired. You know, do that. Maybe I shouldn't be talking this. I better be careful what I say. But we all sat in a boat, and we got the gentleman who was on that cabin cruiser, and we told him, "You got to pull this boat because you got us out here." Anyway, I was in charge of the boarding team because I was an acting sub-lieutenant. Everybody else were ratings. And I said, "Gents, let's do this." And so what I didn't know at the time was the old man that was with us from that cabin cruiser was sickly and he was on medication. And so when we got back to the Inagua, to our patrol boat, he was already weak and dehydrated and he started to change color. You know, he's a Cuban American. Started to change color. And in changing color, our captain realized that, look, something wrong here. What y'all do to this man? And of course, you know me, I've been trained to touch him up once or twice just to get information to try and get the drugs. But I found out shortly thereafter when we was on the way to base, because we found the drugs on the southern side. It wasn't on our side. We brought it on board. We was bringing it, not to base, we were bringing it to Prince George Wharf, because around that time, all the drugs we used to just take to Prince George Wharf, right? And we taking the drugs to Prince George Wharf, and when the nephew came and he saw his uncle in the state that he was in, did he take his medication? He started asking all kind of questions. So everybody think this man on death row now. He's about to die, right? And we call the hospital, man. When we reach Nassau, the ambulance waiting, and they rush him off to the hospital. And who would I see on the dock? Calling me, Ben, come here. The Fuhrer, Commander Amos Roll. And I was afraid because you hear so much about Amos Roll. I mean, I knew him, but you hear how he carry on. And I was like, oh man, I'm dead now. I done for. And he called me and he started to, what's going on? And I told him what happened. And he said, well, Ben, look, you're a Defense Force officer. If you end up in court, I got your back. We can make sure we supporting you. You don't have nothing to worry about when it comes to that. Say, but why did you beat the guy? And I told him, I said, you know, Commander, I just thought that's what you're supposed to do to find a better drug. Now, Amos Roll is a guy who they had just written up a couple of years ago for, you know, shooting a Cuban American 16-year-old or something like that, Negrete Isaacs. And you would have heard the stories about, you know, how they throw people in the water and tie rope around the ankle and pull the boat until they talk. But, you know, they were experts. They knew what they were doing. And he told me straight and plain, Ben, in future, don't be beating when you beat somebody, pick the strong fella. Don't beat the weak guy, man. Beat the strong fella. Like that, you can't get no trouble. And he made me feel so much better. Just knowing that he told me Defense Force is going to have my back if I have to go to court. Because I can tell you, I've been told by other officers before I spoke with Amos Roll about that situation that, oh, you're going to have to explain to the press why you killed this man. And I was like, oh, what's this all about? So he just gave me comfort. And I was only one of many officers that he would come and console when they're getting into problems. And ratings will tell you what Amos Roll would have done in their life when they thought they was going into problems. So when I say Amos Roll was one of the best officers passed through that force, I'm not guessing that. I am telling you what I experienced, what a lot of other people experience. And you talk to people today and they tell you there was nothing like Amos Roll. Then we had Bachelet LaFleur coming out of course, that same police marines regime, and he would have been next to him as role in rank. Eh? It was two of them, Bachelet LaFleur and Scotty Monroe. Now, Mr. Edwin Scotty Monroe was also lieutenant commander. Bachelet LaFleur was lieutenant commander, right? They were all navigators in the police marines. They knew the waters. But Bachelet LaFleur handled ships like I have never seen. Here is a man who, once he got used to those ships, and I mean he was used because obviously he came out ship handling from the Royal Bahamas Police Force Marine Division, and the things he would do with ships will amaze you. Then everybody got to slow down to go through a cut. He's not touching his throttles. He's just coming off the ocean, going through the cut onto the banks, and he's still doing the same speed. I watched them go in Elizabeth Harbor at 20 knots on the Marlin. Pitch dark. Nothing but radar. He sat in front of that radar and he corned his way to the dock. And when he got near the dock, he pulled that throttle up from 20 knots so that he could dog the Marlin. I've never seen anybody else try that. But of course, I did it later on, but this is not about me, eh? This is about Batch. That's the kind of officer he was. He would tell you how to find certain channels like Blossom Channel, Lock, and he telling you these things by looking at the sea. And then we had Edwin Scotty Monroe. Again, a senior man to all of us. We were just Dartmouth trained officers just getting into the system. We don't know nothing but the Bahamas waters. He would give you some eyeball navigation because he see you run into the radar to figure out where you are. And he'll tell you, no, don't look at that radar. Come here, let me show you what's going on. And he'll tell you, look at the water. What kind of water you see? What depth you think that is? And he will make you learn eyeball navigation. And these three officers were so impacting to young officers like myself. And the Turnquests and the Donwares and the Jackson Riches and everybody else, we had to learn from them. So that's how impacting they were. So now let's go on to the squadron commanding officer. Eh? You got the COs. The commanding officers, well, first of all, you got the squadron commanding officer who's overall in charge. Eh? And he would have reporting directly to him the COs of the commanding officers of all the large craft. That's craft over 60 foot and over. Eh? We consider them large craft. And large craft, meaning they would have executive officers working under them or an executive officer. They would have things like navigating officers. They call them deck watch officers, or that's what the SCCW call them. And then you have senior ratings, and you have, of course, deck ratings. So those large craft would be loaded with people. Some of them carry up to 40 and 50 people, 60, 70 in certain situations. So these would report directly to the SCO. Also reporting directly to the SCO would be one officer called the small craft commander. And small craft is anything under 60 feet. And this will also include what happens in Nassau Harbor with the Harbor Patrol Unit. So here it is. The squadron commanding officer would be a full three-ring commander. And he would have mostly lieutenant commanders reporting him. For the large craft COs and a lieutenant commander that's overall responsible for all small craft. Okay? And then, of course, the air wing commander would also be reporting to him. And who would the air wing commander be? That would be the person in charge of the air wing division. We got a couple planes, right? We got a couple pilots. We got senior ratings for serving on aircraft and junior ratings serving on aircraft. And they coming up and sometimes they become pilots and they become officers and all the rest of that. So the air wing commander would be a lieutenant commander, and he will be reporting to the squadron commanding officer, who, of course, would be a three-wing commander. And we're going to go beyond just two little planes. The Defense Force need to introduce drones. I know we have drones that were purchased, but we need to launch them from our base, from the satellite bases, from ships on patrol. So we have to have people on board in these places that knows how to regulate and operate those drones. We need to have a drone office. We need to have helicopters. And I say at least 3. Why? Because when we're doing search and rescue, there's nothing like a helicopter to help. When we're doing disaster relief after a hurricane, nothing like a helicopter to help. And also the infantry division, when they're doing their military stuff, they know how to climb down and drop out of helicopters and all the rest of that stuff. So some may say, why? We only got a little defense force, we only a little country, why we need a helicopter? No, let's not limit ourselves. We can learn to drive helicopters just like the Brits, just like the Americans, just like anybody in the world, them smarter than us. So yes, we need helicopters, and we need to train people to drive them. We need 2 fighter jets. Oh, we're not going to war. No, we're not going to war. But why can't we have a good 5, 6 people in the defense force knowing how to fly fighter jets? Do we have the capacity? Yes. We could pick the students from high school who would be capable of going to Annapolis, Top Gun training, and become fighter jet pilots. Yes, we need 1 or 2 fighter jets. And yes, we need to keep them running. And yes, we need to keep them maintained. Because there's no reason why the best little navy in this hemisphere or in this zone, in this world, as far as I can say, should not have at least 2 fighter jets with well-trained pilots that are seasoned and always flying the fighter jets. Okay, so that's the Air Wing Department. Then we go to the Intelligence Commander. Again, intelligence. What is intelligence? Maybe seem to think that intelligence are the people who pimping off everybody and reporting that to the Commodore or whoever. No, intelligence should be for the ships. We need intelligent information, so when we go there, we know what vessels were arrested in the past, what vessels are expected to be out there, and we need that intelligence to be reporting to the SEO who can feed that into his fleet. So we need the intelligence commander along with a senior rate in intelligence, or senior rates, and a deputy intelligence commander, and an intelligence junior rating. Eh? And we need to keep that going, and they need to be feeding directly into to the SEO, and this, of course, the intelligence commander would be a lieutenant commander reporting to a 3-ring commander to keep the intelligence, and the intelligence commander would also be responsible for the communications department. That's all communications, dealing with all the ships, with the airplanes, with everything. So he has his plate full. Yes, and he reports directly to the SEO. Last but not least, we want a sea training officer that is reporting to the SEO. This sea training commander, as we would call him, would also be lieutenant commander. And he would have a series of officers working under him. He would have some sea training officers, sea training senior ratings, no junior rates. Because sea training means they're going on these boats and they're actually testing systems. They're doing ship wake-ups and all the stuff they're doing. Yeah? The deck surveys, they're going to be surveying ships, inspecting ships. And this sea training department is where we want to go. Because we need to know that sea training is being carried out in the Defense Force, because we got ships out there. And of course, if you got ships out there, you expect the ships to be working at their ultimate capacity. Yeah? That's how we go. So there you go. That kind of wraps up our sea training department. And to encapsulate, our sea training department would consist of the officers, the senior rates, and the surveyors and inspectors. Surveyors and inspectors. Defense Force needs that desperately. And we're going to learn how to do that by being port state inspectors, by serving as technical officers in the BMA technical department. And we can apply those things to the Defense Force. So again, the SEO is responsible for a litany of stuff. The squadron commander, he deals with all the commanding officers on the large craft. He deals with one small craft commander, who's also lieutenant commander, responsible for anything under 60 feet in conjunction with harbor patrol. the Air Wing Commander. And again, we're going to have pilots, we're going to have senior rates, junior rates, we're going to have drones, we're going to introduce helicopters, we're going to introduce 2 fighter jets. And we're going to have Top Gun trainees that went to Annapolis and did extremely well. We got the intelligence commander along with his team, and he's also going to be responsible for the communications department, which is a huge department, communicating with all the ships at sea, communicating with all the aircraft, anything that is active out there. The communications department have to deal with it. And then we got the sea training department, where we have a sea training commander, and of course he have a slew of officers and senior rates, and they're going to be doing all the surveys, all the inspections, all the workups, and that type of thing. And that is going to be the strength of the squadron command. Then we move to the engineering department. And this needs to move tantamount. Call it in tandem. Move in tandem to the squadron, because the ships cannot move without good engineering. We want good engineering. We don't want our engineering system to fail after 10 years like we're accustomed to. No, let them go 30 and 40 years like they do in the real armed forces, because they have well-qualified, properly qualified engineers. Eh? This defense force had never had properly qualified people serving on the vessels. Why? I don't know. Swinley didn't do it. Belton didn't do it. And of course, it just kept going down from there. Smith didn't do it. Roll, Davy Roll, no. Scavella, no. Roddy Bowe, no. Tellis Bethel, no. It's still not being done under Dr. King, but guess what? I think Dr. King is going to make the difference. I have my bet on Dr. King to start having officers going off to become properly certified engineers to serve on these ships in the engine room as engineering officers. And eventually, you will have a force engineering officer that served in the engine room as an engineering officer, that has the requisite STCW certification as a chief engineer, and all the rest of that stuff, so that the defense force could now become so efficient that when we pay these millions of dollars to buy a vessel, that vessel carries us at least 30 years. Eh? And so how is our engineering department going to be set up? First of all, we're going to have every single engineer do an engineering program to certify them. Now, we used to have Manhattan. Manhattan is closed down, no longer exists. They were replaced by HMS Sultan. Eh? And HMS Sultan, they train engineering officers. They train rating apprentices. And so everybody who wants to be an engineer can go through HMS Sultan in England. And it's worth the investment. We invest too much in the deck side and nothing in the engine side. Let's make them parallel. Our engineers should be just as strong as our deck officers, same certification, same qualification, so that our engineering could go just as far as those ships would take it. Now, the engineering officer is also going to be a Dartmouth trained officer, because he has to do the first 8 months at Dartmouth to become an officer. Once he does that 8 months at Dartmouth, he doesn't go to sea on TTS and all the rest of that. He goes into HMS Sultan and starts his Marine Engineering Officer program. Yeah? And we're going to run that in tandem once he get out of that training and have that naval status. Work that in tandem, get him on some commercial ships, and let him be certified commercially as well. And this is the way we need to go with our engineering in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, eh? This is the way to go. So we're going to have our force engineering officer, who's going to be a 3-ring commander. And he's going to be reporting to the captain of Coral Harbor. So this force engineering officer will have below him all chief engineers serving on all the large craft, right? And the chief engineers on all the small craft. Second engineers, engineering watch officers, senior engineering rating, and of course, engineering ratings, right? So you'll have the chief engineers, then you'll have a machinery maintenance officer. Now, this engineer would be responsible for dealing with all the large craft engineering officers, helping them to plan when they have their overhauls, when they have their, and of course, he would also be a part of causing surveys to be done, engineering surveys, to make sure things stay intact, okay? He would also be dealing with small craft engineer officers, under 60-foot, harbor patrol vessels. So the machinery maintenance officer would be reporting directly to the force engineering officer. Eh? Then you have the hull maintenance officer, who again reports directly to the force engineering officers. He will be dealing with dry dock preparations, dry dock maintenance, making sure that these ships don't get old by the hull. That's what he does. He's a shipyard specialist. He's going to be properly trained, properly qualified. And that's the hull maintenance officer reporting directly to the base, the force engineering officer. Then you have the technical maintenance officer. This person is again going to be lieutenant commander. All these people are lieutenant commanders, eh? He's going to be responsible for all electricians, all the technicians, everybody that's not dealing directly with the machinery, eh? The technical team, they will do all the technical maintenance on board all the vessels, and of course, the workshops on the base. We got the maintenance planning officer. You got to plan out the machinery, the lifetime for every piece of equipment on every ship got to be planned out. So with the help of the maintenance planning officer, the chief engineer on board the ships would also keep the BEO, or the force engineering officer, the FEO, advised that all of these things are being covered on a day-to-day, ongoing basis. And that's where the maintenance planning officer come in. Okay? And then you got the vehicle maintenance officer, because the Defense Force have a lot of vehicles, a lot of cars, a lot of buses, and guess what? They need to be properly maintained. So we're going to have specialists, people who have been to sea, people who have been to mechanic workshops, and these type people are going to be running the vehicle maintenance officer. We'll have a team of people who are dealing with maintaining all the buses and trucks, all the small vehicles, and all the vehicles even on the family islands and whatnot. Eh? He is going to run that, and he's going to be reporting directly to the force engineering officer. So we'll have a full force engineer officer, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 entities reporting to him. They're all lieutenant commanders, and they all have their own neck of the woods response. And then you're going to change around those responsibilities so that they all can become familiar with all these areas, because they're all engineers, eh? And then we have the administration department. And we're getting there, people. Don't get bored with me now. Those of you in Defense Force, you all know exactly what we're talking about. The admin department, you got the BXO. The BXO, he's overall responsible for running that base, right? For the captain of crawler, because he's a training commander. And he's going to have under his realm 2, 4, 6 lieutenant commanders. The areas they're going to be in, you have the base administration officer working directly under the BXO. He's responsible for the accountability of everybody employed, even the contractors. He got to make sure everybody coming to work and doing their time, and he ain't sneaking out time, this and that and the rest. And he got a team of people under him, because he's a lieutenant commander. He's going to have a lieutenant. He's going to probably have a sub-lieutenant. He's going to have senior rates, and they're going to assist in keeping accountability of everybody, whether they're on vessels or whether they're shoreside. The accountability will be kept by his team. And the upkeep of all the grounds on the base, eh? Got a lot of stuff to go on. The duty watch got to take care of certain things. And so that upkeep of those grounds will be the responsibility of the base administration officer, who will be reporting directly to the BXO, because he's going to be a lieutenant commander reporting to a commander. And then you got the base disciplinary officer. Again, we need penalties for breaches of regulations and policies. This is a big job. And this is the area where we could hire in civilian lawyers. We don't need Defense Force lawyers to do this. We can have civilian lawyers being basically liaising with the base disciplinary officer, who's going to bring people to those civilian legal minds to be judged. And then, of course, we can start moving into areas like court martials of officers. Remember, commissioned officers can't be tried summarily. You have to court martial them, but you need a good team because they're going to bring in their outside lawyers, and you need to have on staff lawyers that can actually deal with, at that level, with lawyers from the outside. That was one of the problems we had in the force when I was there. Now, the base training officer. Gonna have a training officer for the base. Of course, headquarters have their own international training liaison people, but the base, they're going to be responsible for all the recruit trainings and, of course, all the promotions, training, leadership courses, that type of thing. And that, again, will be spearheaded by a lieutenant commander who's going to be reporting to the BXO as a commander and keep things going from that perspective. Then we got the base medical officer. This is the doctor in sick bay. He's going to be lieutenant commander. Now, eventually he may become a commander, right? Because medical may come directly under the captain. So we may now spread that out. But as it stands now, let's keep it under the BXO for now until we get to the level where we want to make it bigger, larger. And we may bring in a couple local doctors as well. They don't have to be military officers to be doctors. We could bring in doctors and they don't have to carry ranks. They don't have to be in a promotion scheme. And they could run that base medical situation like the police always did with Miss Penman. I think Miss Pendergrass or whatever her name was, Defense Force and Police had her initially, and she basically ran the sick bay. Accounts liaison officer. We don't need the accounts department to be Defense Force personnel. Bring in properly qualified people from outside. We outsource that. They come on the base. They do the job for us. Maybe they could be from the Ministry of the Prime Minister office, where they have the Ministry of Finance that has accountants. Or we could bring in civilian accountants and let them do the work for us, right? But we'll have an accounts liaison officer who will be a lieutenant commander that deals directly with that crew and reports to the base executive officer. And then we have, last but not least, the supplies liaison officer. Same thing. We don't need supply personnel dealing with supplies to be no Defense Force trained persons. Let's use the outside help, use the people who deal with supplies outside and let them do that. But we need one officer and maybe one seniorate to liaise with them on an ongoing basis to make sure the Defense Force is being taken care of in a proper way, since we got to pay them for providing the service. So that officer and seniorate will correlate with the supplies department and again report to the BXO for things that may be going out of whack, or just to let them know everything okay, or when you need certain things change. Of course, the BXO need to get involved. You get the BXO involved. And so that's it. The admin department will be dealing with the BXO in charge. He will have the base admin officer who will deal with employment accountability and upkeep of the grounds. He'll have the base disciplinary officer that will deal with penalties for regulations, and we'll have some outside help from lawyers and whatnot that we can hire in on a contractual basis. Then we can have the base training officer, recruit trainings, promotion, leadership courses. The base medical officer, accounts liaison officer, supplies liaison officer, and these are the people who are going to be reporting to the BXO, and they're going to have everything covered based on what needs to happen from the base perspective, and the BXO will then be accountable to the captain. And then the captain, of course, will be accountable to the Commodore, and that is how the base should go. And last but not least, now let's touch upon the areas we already talked about. We already talked about how the headquarters is set up. We already talked about the deck department with the SEO, who would have a litany of lieutenant commanders reporting to him. The engineering department, same thing. As the force engineering officer, he would have all the COs of large craft and the other engineering areas with their heads, machinery maintenance officer, the hull maintenance, technical maintenance, maintenance planning, and vehicle maintenance, all reporting to him. Then the admins, we got the BXO. Reporting to him would be the base admin officer, base disciplinary officer, base training officer, base medical officer, accounts liaison, and supplies liaison officers. And that is what we do. But last but not least, we got the infantry division. Boy, look how time rolling, eh? Infantry division. What is our infantry division? Of course, every single... Now, first of all, the infantry division. These are the guys that are army, commandos. Everybody got big green berets. They all gonna have passed the All Arms Commando course. That's readily achievable. We have a country full of athletes. Come on, man. We do well on the world scale. We can find the people who want to serve in the defense force, but they don't want to go to sea. They don't want to be no engineer. They just want to be boot toters. They want to be in the bush and rugged and hand-to-hand combat and train to be bodyguards. And this is what we're going to do with the infantry division. Yes, it's only going to be 10% of the force, but 10% of the force is 150 to 200 men. And the infantry division, my friend, they would all carry Marine or Army ranks and ratings. So the officers in the infantry division, they would know how to go on a boat because they didn't really do that much, right? They did limestone. That's where they did the training. Between limestone and Sanders. That's where the Royal Navy Army and Royal Navy Marine officers train. And our officers are going to be like lieutenant colonels. We'll have one lieutenant colonel who is equivalent to what? A 3-ring commander. A lieutenant colonel is a 3-ring commander. We'll have majors. Majors are lieutenant commanders. We have army captains. Yes, they're captains, but they're not Navy captains. They're army captains. They fall below. They in line. The army captain is really in line with a senior lieutenant. Eh? Then we'll have the lieutenant junior grade, which is 1.5 bar. And that lieutenant is the same as a lieutenant in the regular force. Then we'll have a second lieutenant who's like a sub-lieutenant. And then we'll have the officer cadet who's like the midshipman. And as far as the ratings are concerned, we're going to have sergeant first class. That's like your force chief petty officer. Staff sergeant. That's your chief petty officer. Sergeant. That's your PO. Corporal. Leading hand. Specialist. Private first class and private. So we're going to go down the ranks and compare notes. And we're going to make sure that our infantry people all are green berets. All are very polished. And they all dealing with what infantry should be doing. They know when they join that you're not going to run this force because this is Navy force. So if you're infantry, you want to be infantry, well, look, you could go as far as 3-ring commander and that's it. Excuse me. And that's how we got to roll with this. We ain't taking no prisoners. You're only 10% of the force. So how you could run the whole force and you've never been on a ship as an engineer or CO, chief engineer or CO. It don't work that way. And in our infantry, we're going to have the infantry commanding officer. He's going to be the lieutenant colonel. 1. It's the highest he'll get. And under him would be 4 lieutenant commander level, which is what we call major. You'll have 4 majors. Those majors would be running the 4 subdivisions in the infantry department. That would be the outpost division officer, right? ODO. He, of course, will be a major, equivalent to the lieutenant commander. And he will be running or overseeing all outpost duties. That's the government house. That's the British High Commissioner, U.S. Ambassador, all the rest of that. All that stuff will come under the ODO or outpost division officer. That one would be lieutenant commander. So that's where most of the manpower would be, I would think, right? And then, of course, we'll have the fitness division officer. He will deal with the force fitness program. We get too much fat people in the defense force. So we really need a serious lieutenant commander to be in charge of making sure on an annual basis, everybody got to pass this fitness test. And we ain't talking no prisoners. If you can't pass, get out of the force. We get enough people who want to join the force and want to do better. And once you know you got to do that fitness course, guess what? You ain't going to allow yourself to get too fat. You can stay in shape. That's what we need in the force. So we'll have a force fitness program where the fitness division officer will ensure that everybody get a taste of that. Then the recruits fitness. We're going to have somebody in the training department, right, dealing with the fitness of the recruits while they training. And then, of course, we can have somebody working under the fitness division officer to deal with all sports in the Defense Force. They have oversight for all the sports, no matter what sport it is. The sporting teams, again, got to be fit. We ain't running no little jokey business in this force. That's why the infantry department division is going to be so important. So there's two people now reporting to the infantry commanding officer, the fitness division officer and the outpost division officer. And we got two more, the ceremonial division officer. This one oversees all ceremonial commitments. And that includes things like state funerals, military funerals. That includes parades for independence. That includes when you have foreign entities coming in and you're meeting them at the airport, you have a little drill unit. This person is going to be pretty busy. But he will be a major in the infantry department, reporting to the infantry commanding officer to deal with all ceremonial matters, eh? Then we can have the amphibious division officer. What is amphibious division officer? Well, of course, that's a guy who he dealing with searching keys and searching islands and staying out in the bush, because they're amphibious. They're coming from they're working between the boat and the land, right? They landing from aircrafts in certain remote areas. They there when you have your national unrest. They're the ones who are going to be in the armored car carrying tank thing and assisting the police where they need high-tech assistance. Because these are all Green Berets and these fellas sharp and they train and they amphibious and they there for help. And of course, they're going to be a big-time disaster relief assistant crew. So your amphibious division officer is going to be lieutenant commander with probably one officer and a couple senior rates and junior rates working under him. But guess, they're going to be very impactful. So anything to do with your infantry in that defense force will be Green Berets that are properly certified Green Berets, and they're going to be serious about their duties, and there ain't going to be nothing to play with. So everybody will have to respect them, whether you're in the defense force or not. So, ladies and gentlemen, finally, we don't want any more good officers being squeezed out of the defense force due to pettiness. We have had our experiences with that. It started with a certain commander. After the commission of inquiry, they were searching for head to roll, and I can tell you, his head rolled. And all the foolishness came out of the commission of inquiry. He was one of probably the 5% of the people who lost their jobs as a result of the commission of inquiry. And he was not nowhere near what they say some of those other people were. And we all were shocked because we thought it was foolishness. But that's politics and we ain't getting in that, right? Let's go to the next two highly impacting leaders. These were two of the leading Dartmouth trained officers in the force. And somehow they were targeted and they had to go because some captured craft was taken off the base in daylight. And all kind of stories was rigged up as to what the deal was with that captured craft. Until push came to shove and those officers decided to resign. You know, that didn't worth it no more. And that is the level of pettiness. All of what was invested into those officers. All of what those officers invested into the force. They can let a little petty thing like a boat coming off the base in front of everybody in daylight hours. But you know, there's a lot of undergirding going in the defense force back then. A lot of power pushers, power seekers. And it's unfortunate, but you know, I say to Commander King, to the Commander of the Defense Force, Dr. Raymond King, please let the pettiness stop. We don't want to be losing good officers out of pettiness. And then we had a top performing commanding officer. This guy was one of the best we had when it comes to ship handling, when it comes to navigation, when it comes to just being a leader. and some little property to do. He bought piece of property or 2 pieces of property, and they were like, and he talking about a married man. Oh, we need you to say how you get this property. And the guy just got fed up. He just got fed up and say, look here, I ain't going through this because the command did not step in and say this foolishness. Nobody said, it was just pettiness. And we lost 3 top officers, 4, through these kind of pettiness. And then one day it came down to me. Yeah, let me tell you how petty it was. I used to play volleyball. I played with the national team for a couple of years. I went Defense Force team. I was the senior person on the Defense Force team. We went to Jamaica to play in a tournament, a Venus tournament. And while we were there, we had a civilian coach. And that coach ventured to do something that didn't go in line with us living on the Defense Force base at our park camp. I wouldn't go into what he wanted to do, but I stopped him because I knew what it was. I was an officer, and I was the one who they held responsible for everybody doing the right thing while they were on a park camp. And he got upset with me. And the next day he decided he could take it out on the volleyball court because he was the coach. So I did the honorable thing, and I stopped playing with the team. And 2 days later, because, the tournament had started, and I was, of course, the leading setter for the team. I was the national team setter. And we had 4 Bahamians come down. Volleyball, you need 6 players. And they needed 2 more. And they asked me to play with them. I said, man, I can't play with y'all, man. They said, man, we don't want no Jamaicans with us. Please come play with us. And they said they spoke to the coach, and he said he ain't worrying about what I do and this. Anyway, I played with them. And another player from the team who was a civilian. We took 1 civilian with us, along with the coach who was a civilian. Everybody else is on Defense Force. So me and that other civilian, he and I joined with the 4 Bahamian national team players. And we went all the way to the championship. We lost in the championship. But you know what they did? They gave me the same fellow who the coach put on the bench from the Defense Force crew. They gave me an MVP along with the setter from the team who beat us. They gave her 2 MVPs. I got 1. And of course he got upset. When he got back to Nassau, he told the Commodore, and I ain't calling the Commodore name, told the Commodore at the time that I quit playing with the Defense Force team to play with a Jamaican team. He lied on me. He didn't say, I quit playing for the Defense Force team because me and him had issues with him trying to do some things at a park camp that I wasn't going to allow. And I ended up playing with a crew of Bahamians who came to Jamaica to play. He didn't say that. He said, I quit to play with a Jamaican team. And without calling me in and asking my side of the story, the Commodore sent me a letter of reprimand. And in the letter it said, if you do anything like this again, you could be fired from the Defense Force. Well, of course, I took that serious because now my job is being threatened over some pettiness that didn't even happen. But because the Commodore at the time was so petty, instead of calling in his officer who was representing him, he listened to the civilian because I guess he just didn't like me. I don't know. But these are the pettiness, and that's what caused me. The following year I was going to leave the Defense Force anyway, but then they sent me to the Port Department first, right? So I didn't leave no more. I left 5 years later. But I knew that I couldn't go through the system of pettiness. And it's a litany of us. And then there was another officer, junior me. He bought a BMW. And his BMW didn't cost as much as a regular Honda Accord. But because he had a BMW, they stigmatized him. They following him. They questioning him. How you could drive a BMW? Where you get the money from? And then, and I ain't get calling him. Everybody knew who had the BMW, right? That's my boy. But but he, of course, got upset. But he stuck it out, right? He stuck it out until he retired. But the minute he retired, he was out of there. And it's just pettiness that the Defense Force lost so many good officers who had so much to contribute and who had contributed so much already over petty leadership. So that we got to cut out. So, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our show for tonight. Again, our sponsors, One-on-One Pharmacy, Bahamas Maritime Connection, GBI, and Bimini Pilots. I say good night to Annie Mae. I hope you don't go and sleep on me. I know you ain't like all this details and this and that, but I had to get it out, Annie Mae. I had to get it out. So thanks to you, our valued listening audience. With that, I say Maritime Matters.